So I recently watched a video from Windy Hill Foundry. He had a series of videos on a particular part, and he had issues in his foundry with both the patterns he got. Neither pattern was technically wrong. Some of the issues are what happened in the foundry, and some of the issues are what happened in the pattern shop. So I was going to take a look at the part I'm talking about. Looks similar to this one. It's not a complicated part. It's relatively easy, but he had a couple issues with both patterns he got. One was built by a pattern maker. There's nothing wrong with the way he did it, but the issues I'll go over. I just noticed I'm trying to get things so Clark doesn't have the problem he has. He's doing too much work on the patterns himself. He should be able to get a pattern in without having to do anything. As a foundry, he should be doing just some molding, pouring, cleaning up the casting, and ship it off to the customer. So things to consider is here. First, you'll have a customer. He'll bring in the drawing or the part he wants made, and with him you'll discuss machining allowance, what he needs to do for setup on his machine to get the part machined. Does it have target points? Pattern draft. What draft is going to affect the machining of the part? And he's always concerned about the finished part. So he takes it into a foundry. Foundry's concerned about the molding, the easiest way to do it, the best way to do it. Parting line. Number of core boxes will be determined by the shape of the part. Let's see, gating and risering will be done by the foundry, and casting cleanup. That's all done. Now the pattern maker is going to do a layout of the part, usually. Some parts are pretty easy. This was a fairly simple part. You didn't have much layout on it. Core boxes, how to make them and where they're located, draft and where it's needed and how much, and determining the cope and drag. Now the pattern maker will coordinate with both the foundry and the customer or the machine shop to cover all of this. That's his job. So we'll take a look at this part and see what could be done differently to help Windy Hill Foundry out. So here's the part. Okay, again, simple part, nothing complex about it. He had one pattern that was made this way, and sorry about the color. I just printed them up, and this is color I had to make this part. It was already in the printer. So the other pattern was made this way. Exact same part. They do exactly the same thing. I shouldn't say. Similar parts that are built similar ways. So go into this one first. This one, nothing wrong with the way it's built. You got a cope and a drag. Nothing wrong with it, except the problem he had is the pattern he made for this one was made like this one. Parting line was here, and his problem was he made the core box like this one, where the parting line of the core box was down here. Problem with that is you look at the two side by side, the pattern won't allow the core to seat in there properly. So what Clark had to do is he had to file this down to get it to fit in the mold properly. Something he should never have to do. Parting line should have been on this one right down the center, just like this one was built. This one had two core boxes, one for a cope, one for the drag. It's a perfectly acceptable way to build the part. Problem he had is this required the two cores to be glued together, and he didn't have one core glue, and two, if you don't put them together with core glue, If you put them in the mold and set one on top of the other without the glue, you could get the part to raise up a little bit. You're going to have flashing all through along the center. It's not good for both the foundry cleanup. And so what he had to do is he had to cut an opening through the core box on either end so he could ram it from here. And that was a lot of work on Clark's part that he shouldn't have had to do. The reason he had to do that is the core is warped and they wouldn't have fit in the mold properly, and that would have caused the flashing I was talking about. So, me being me, I guess, I decided the better way to do either one of these to satisfy Clark's need is I made a pattern like this one. Cope and drag pieces. Notice I got core prints, cope and drag. So what I did is after I built the pattern, I made a core box right about there. It incorporates loose pieces so I can match a draft both cope and drag in the core. There's 5 degrees draft here, there's 5 degrees draft here, and everything fits together. Ram the core up. I made this loose piece. I incorporated the fillet here, so the problem with the first casting, this one, is because he didn't incorporate the fillet. I think he did on the drag side here, if that was his drag, but he couldn't up here. So what I did is I incorporated the fillet there by extending this out a little bit, put the fillet in. Everything is drafted properly. Strike the core off, pull this loose piece out, finish the strike off, make sure it's clean, then you can pull each one of these loose pieces out. Pull both ends basically. Both ends like so, pull these loose pieces out, then you can take the core out, and you got something to hang on to set the core in the mold. And I'll get into that in a minute, so set these back in here, piece like so. That one, and the last piece goes in here, and then you can put this one back in. So that's an easy way to make the core. The core is now one piece. You won't get any flash down along this parting line here. No flash at all in there. That can be cleaned up on the core. You won't get any flash coming in from the sides of the core this way because it's, again, one piece. The other thing I did is I made another core box. So with this core box that I made, I'm able to incorporate this radius up here on top if that's required. And you could put it on both sides by making both ends of the core box this way. This is all machined down the bore, so I didn't really need to do that, so I didn't. This core print has 10 degrees, this side has 15, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I got the core box made and the pattern made, and let's see if I can move this out just a little bit. Okay, so the core box. When I finish making the cores, one core looks like this. It's all one piece. It'll set in the mold in one piece. The center core for the bore is just a core that'll look like that. It's one piece. There will be no parting line shown here, and you can get by with zero draft on this because both ends of the box are open and there's no excess machining on there. With if you leave this open, you try and pull it out of the sand mold like he had a problem with, this centerpiece could break, which it did on his. You're going to end up with excess machining on there because you're going to add positive draft to it, or plus draft. So you're adding material for the excess machining. May not be a big deal for the customer, but sometimes it is. So after I get the two cores made, don't need the core boxes anymore, they can go away. I take my flask and got my drag flask here, It goes on like so. Take my coat flask, goes on like so, and I flip the whole thing over. Then I place my pattern in there. This is the drag pattern. Goes in like so. I put it in this way. That gives me plenty of room around the pattern to ram up. It's a little tight here, but you got a lot of room between the metal and the side of the flask. And you got plenty of room here for the gating. So after I ram it up, so I've rammed up the mold, put my bottom board on it. I can flip the whole thing over, and of course it's going to be hard if you got a flask the size Clark has, because it's a two-person job guaranteed. So you flip it over, pull the coat mold off, you pull the pattern out, bam, you got your cavity in there, and your cores should fit in just like this. Set one core in, make sure it seats in there good, set this core in, close up the coat mold, and you're good to go. That way he's got something to hang on to, he's got a solid core, you end up with no flashing anywhere on the inside of this. Any flashing that does happen would be running along these edges. And because the core sticks out in this bore both sides, instead of having to grind a parting line where there was flashing in it, all you got to do is flashing will be sticking up this way on both sides of the bore. Easy to clean up. So things you got to think about is any extra time you can spend on the pattern is going to make it a lot easier for the machine shop and the foundry. And that's the pattern maker's primary concern, is make it as easy as you can to get a good casting from a foundry. So if you're going to do work for Clark and Windy Hill Foundry and build them a pattern, consider any option you can do to make his work a lot easier, and we may be able to help him get some of his backlog down, which would be a benefit for him and just make things easier. He's spending too much time trying to fix different parts of his castings or patterns to get them to work for him. And communication is the key. You have to communicate as a pattern maker, especially. You have to communicate with the foundry and the customer. Just don't make something up and say, here, make it for me. It's not the proper way to do it, in my opinion, but that's the way I was taught, and that's the way I've always worked it. And you know, a lot of you guys are doing this on your own, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you are the customer, you're the foundry, and you're the pattern maker. So make your work easiest when you get a casting back from yourself. So that's my views. I guess it's kind of sort of my little rant, but let's make things easier for the foundry if you're going to try and get a foundry to do some casting for you and you built the pattern. So that's about it. We'll talk at you later. You guys all have a good day.